Hello, welcome back to Sustainability Mindshift webcast. We're your hosts, Brad Pierce and Melker Larson. And in this webcast, we'll be exploring what it takes to be a sustainability leader today, including the skills and the capabilities and specifically the mindsets for effective sustainability transformation and leadership. We're really lucky to have Kurt Harrison here on the call with us today. Hi, Kurt.
Hello, glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Let me just tell you a little bit about Kurt. Kurt is a partner in the firm. This is Russell Reynolds, the firm's financial services sector and co-head of the global sustainability practice. He's active across a number of different practices, including the CEO board advisory, investment management side of the business, and global banking and markets. He's held several leadership roles within the firm, including leading the financial services sector in the Americas and the global asset and wealth management practice. He specializes in providing his clients with executive assessment and succession planning advice, as well as customized solutions for their senior leadership needs. You're based in New York, Kurt, right?
Correct. Yep. Been in New York for longer than I care to admit.
Well, let me just quickly also tell you a little bit about Russell Reynolds for the audience. Russell Reynolds, I've been really impressed with the research coming out of the firm, specifically related to the sustainable leadership competencies for recruiting, leadership development, succession planning, and talent retention, which is some of the areas of focus anyway of Russell Reynolds, which is a very large search and advisory firm with 46 offices in 26 countries around the world. One of the things we're going to be talking about today, which we'll get right into in a second, is the sustainability mindset and a framework that they've developed around that. So thanks again for being here, Kurt. It's good to see you.
Glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Let's just jump right in. One of the reasons I reached out to you and was dying to have you on this webcast is because I've read several of your blogs and really, in my mind, cutting edge data from the corporate world around leadership, around sustainable leadership. You have a report called The Leadership for the Decade of Action, in which case you highlighted that only 4% of executive and non-executive role specifications were based on sustainability experience or mindset as an actual requirement. That was really surprising.
Yeah, the bar for improvement is quite low.
It seems that way, and I hope that's changing. That will be changing soon, clearly, with the increasing interest in ESG, environmental social governance, from the investment community, and I'm sure you saw the IPCC report the other day, which was scary.
Yeah, it was scary, and I think it just highlights the time sensitivity to all of this. So the backdrop on the Leadership for the Decade of Action, this was a joint venture partnership with the United Nations Global Compact. So the UNGC is the organization that came up with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved by 2030. So as we all know, that's 9 years away. About 2 years ago, the UN Global Compact came to us, to Russell Reynolds Associates, and said, we don't think we're going to make it on time. We need to get business more involved. We cannot rely on global governments at a time of global government dysfunction in many parts of the world, including our own. And so it's going to be imperative that businesses take the lead in driving toward the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we worked with them to create a study, and we identified 55 sustainability pioneers, if you will. So senior business executives, not government officials, but business executives who had led sustainable transformations of their business or had created a culture of sustainability that was deeply and fully integrated into their corporate strategy, into their investment strategy, into the way that they view their firm and their place in the world. And we tried to figure out what makes these senior executives tick, what makes them different from other successful senior executives. And what we found 4 key dimensions that we believe are hallmarks of a sustainable mindset. And we think that the next generation of leadership who is going to help the world achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and who's going to help reverse the emissions that are going on right now with regard to climate change, they're going to exhibit these four tendencies, these four dimensions to their character and personality and corporate strategy that perhaps other previous executives have not exhibited.
That's so cool. And that's one of the things that really struck a chord with me is seeing that word sustainable mindset. And it's something that, I've heard increasingly over the last really only couple of years, more talk about the need for the skills side of being able to effectively execute sustainability strategies. And we talk about things like cross-organizational collaboration, et cetera. But the mindset piece was fascinating to me. I'd love to, if you don't mind, just read the definition of what that is from your report. Unless you'd like to, you want me to go ahead and do that?
Well, I can just quickly summarize it for you. So basically, what we're not saying is that these executives are different from previously successful executives. These are the same level business executives, but they also exhibited some unique traits. So of the four primary dimensions that we identified, the first one was multi-level systems thinking. These are broad perspectives. These are people who incorporate a much more holistic worldview that exceeds and expands upon outside of their own specific industry or their own firm or their own geography. They're realizing that there are bigger, broader themes in the world that are going to affect their company. So they're not worried about their company in a very tunnel vision sort of way. They are incorporating bigger, broader, global macro themes into their business strategy. So multi-level systems thinking. The next piece was they are very much an inclusive group of leaders. They have an inclusive management style. They don't manage their employees, they include their employees. So the days of the dictatorial, autocratic, Jack Welch or whatever, Jack Welch is a wonderful person, right, but the days of the autocratic, dictatorial, my way or the highway leader are over, right? It's not going to resonate with your leadership team, your employees, your clients, your customers, your board, or your regulators. So these are inclusive leaders who leverage the skills of their employees and empower them to help change the mindset of an organization. So very inclusive. Mm-hmm. These are also very disruptive people. These are transformational executives. And many of them might say, oh, I'm not a sustainability executive, but I did lead a sustainable transformation of our business, right? So anyone who's driven an operational transformation or an energy efficient transformation that has made their company more efficient, more profitable, more successful. Those are sustainable dimensions right there, right? So they've done it, whether they're calling that or not, but they are transformational executives willing to make changes and question why things can't be done differently. And then the final piece is they're very long-term oriented. We've gotten past short-termism. That's pretty much discredited now. These individuals are willing to make unpopular short-term decisions that they feel will benefit the organization in the long run. So Paul Pullman is sort of the example of this that everyone points to, right? He came on as the CEO of Unilever, made some very unpopular short-term decisions. The board was angry, the consumers were angry, the investors were angry, the stock price went down, but he was right. And eventually it all bore out in a very successful commercial way. And now Unilever is regarded as the gold standard of how to really drive a sustainable business. So long-term orientation, willing to make unpopular short-term decisions for the long-term success of the organization.
That's really fascinating. So and as you're talking about this, and especially as you bring up names like Paul Pullman or someone even like Ray Anderson, for example, right, who was a leader who got it, if you will, early on. There's some leaders that are maybe through life experience. Some are kind of born that way, oriented that way. Some build their experiences over time. And certainly in your world, as you're recruiting and you're moving people up through the organization and succession planning, looking for that key talent, this is a great way to start to orient your searches and you're identifying these people. I'm interested too, in addition to sort of as I'd love to hear some examples about how you identify, how an organization specifically can you might have this framework, which is a great framework to look at, but then how do you assess whether someone has some, one or two or three or all of these different traits?
Yeah, I mean, so in classic corporate jargon, you get what you measure, right? And if you begin to prioritize sustainability and sustainable transformation and long-term orientation, inclusive management, global perspective, multi-level systems thinking, if you begin to incorporate all of those dimensions into your internal assessment process for next-gen talent, next-gen leadership, the millennial generation type talent, begin measuring those individuals against that, and you'll begin to get what you're measuring, right? So part of it is sort of enabling this internally by amending your internal assessment process and really identifying these individuals and helping them to proceed in their careers in a more sustainable way. And then the next piece is internal succession planning. When you're thinking about the next generation managers and leaders of divisions, make sure that this is part of that criteria, right? So if someone does not exhibit a sustainable mindset, they may not be qualified to lead that line of business or that region or that practice or that part of the supply chain, right? So make sure it's woven into your internal assessment and succession planning as well. And then, you get what you measure, you get what you reward, and begin to incorporate this into compensation. This is a very topical theme now, where it's already commonplace in Europe, as Melker can attest to, but many boards are now considering integrating ESG performance metrics into their executive compensation schemes. Pretty revolutionary for the US, pretty commonplace for Europe, but that can permeate throughout the organization, and then development as well. So you have all this internal talent, the next generation of leadership is very hungry and is desperate to be, learn more. How can I be more sustainable? I want to be a sustainable executive. So encourage that by developing that mindset, give them the tools that they need to think about how they can be sustainable in their current roles and how they can apply that throughout their career. So the development piece is also very key.
Yeah.
I'm really interested
if
I can just take another one on this topic of compensation models. And I'm really interested, how does this work? How does the goal setting to be able to measure sustainability work? And in addition to that question as well is, do you think there's any perils to motivating managers by financial reward?
Yeah, I mean, I am, so there's a difference of opinion on this. So some of the very sort of, I call the true believers, the passionate, save the world, save the planet, save the oceans, all this, these are all wonderful things we have to do. They can be skeptical of incentivizing someone by financial remuneration. Well, they're just doing it for the money. They don't really care about it. They don't believe in it. I don't care why they're doing it as long as they do it. So if it's because they are believers in and of themselves, or they've been developed in that way, or they've been mentored and coached in that way, or they're being remunerated in that way, I'm less worried about that. I'm worried about the outcome. And if it takes remuneration to achieve the goals we need to achieve, then I'm all for it. I'm less concerned about why organizations are moving in this direction, and more about the fact that they succeed in their movement in this direction.
All right. So what could be, can you give us an example of what goal you could set to a manager to achieve in order to receive such a formula?
Yeah, so there's a number of different metrics. Unfortunately, there is no standardization, right? There is no template. There is no GAAP accounting standard for sustainability, right? And it's very much, independently assessed and reviewed, and also independently measured by external rating agencies like S&P or Sustainalytics or MSCI or Bloomberg, et cetera. And so every organization is going to need to do what's right for itself, right? And some organizations are more ready to be transformational, others are going to take a little bit longer from a cultural perspective, and that's okay. But you need to be able to set these goals, but also have a strategy for achieving these goals. There's a lot of skepticism now about companies making these net zero commitments, right? We're going to be net zero carbon emitter by 2030. Like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? Like, how are you going to measure that? What are you actually physically going to do? And it's a little fuzzy. It's a little, there's not a lot of really well thought out, coherent standards about how they're going to achieve that. So there's a lot of movement now in global accounting, IFRS standards, PRI standards, SASB, things like that. So we're moving toward a sort of generalized consensus. We're not there yet, but every organization is going to have to determine what is culturally feasible to achieve in the next 10 years, make that the benchmark, and then go do it.
It's interesting. I mean, there's so much coming at us as business leaders, including net zero being one of them, let's say. And one of the things we're grappling with here on this webcast and speaking to experts like you about it is, with all this new demand for sustainable leadership, for sustainability, strategies and operations, which of course, sustainability strategies and operations is nothing new, but the reality is oftentimes that's been managed in-house by a sustainability team and or external with the assistance of external consultants and the partners internally that are specifically executing things like operations, like energy, for example. But what we're grappling with is and what we're interested in exploring further is the need for this sustainable mindset, the sustainable leadership skills beyond just those people that are immediately involved in projects, traditional projects, if you will, in order so that as they are looking at things like, okay, we do need a net zero strategy. Well, that shouldn't just be the small team of sustainability practitioners or the energy team thinking about that. I think all relevant leaders across the organization need to start thinking about, okay, well, how is that going to impact my role and responsibility in the context of my team, in the context of our business, in the context of society and the planet, so that as I'm making decisions, I'm actually stopping for a second and saying, hold on a minute, this choice of a supplier or this, business choice, operations choice, should probably be thinking about looking at it through that new goal that we have and the new set of strategies. And you guys, by creating that framework, start to at least map out what is necessary in order to have that mindset to cause that pause, really,
Yeah, no, I think that's a great segue into what we do all day, every day. So as a global executive search firm, we are helping our clients around the world in every industry, every sector, every geography become more sustainable. And that how to do that has become more and more difficult as the bar of measurement and assessment gets higher and higher. And so what we've found is there's been an absolute explosion in the demand for senior executive leadership around ESG and sustainability. And so what happened was 3 or 4 years ago, the CEO of organizations got tired of being asked questions about ESG that he or she couldn't answer. Mm-hmm. And so they appointed someone internally to be the ESG person. And it was usually someone sitting within compliance or legal or marketing or investor relations. And the CEO told them, could you please just create a basic framework, get us credible, and deal with these investor questions around ESG? And so that worked for a couple of years, but in 2020 and 2021 and beyond, that no longer works. And so what most organizations have found is that their head of ESG needs to have ESG domain expertise. They cannot be a repurposed internal compliance executive, right? So, and one of the main roles of these individuals has been, as companies hire a head of ESG or a chief sustainability officer, a lot of it is just connecting the dots of what's already being done internally. To your point, Brad, every organization has pockets of individuals, business line leaders, supply chain leaders, working on sustainability, right? It's just a natural course of business. We've been doing it for 20 years, but no one's calling it that. And there's no one at the central organizational leadership structure who is driving that, who owns it from an enterprise-wide level, who is creating an enterprise-wide policy and framework, who is integrating that throughout the organization and articulating that to their investors. So a big part of the role of all these heads of ESG that have been hired in the last 18 months is really to connect the dots internally about what's already being done and just make it much more structured and formalized from a framework perspective.
So, one of the things that's interesting, so as you're talking about this, I'm thinking also about the call it the younger generation, if you will, that's now entering the workforce and has been around sustainability for, they were born into the world where recycling existed, which didn't exist when I was a child, and are, we're flooded with news clearly around climate, increasingly so, and that's where a lot of, as we know, the demand is coming from. It's one of the stakeholder groups that is demanding that companies be more sustainable, and they're reading these sustainability reports, from companies that they're applying to jobs from and they're, looking for things like how ambitious and how much is the company committed to this, to ESG, or call it corporate sustainability that traditionally. How much are they walking the walk versus just, this is marketing fluff. So this younger generation is coming in with a mindset, if you will, on some levels that understands the need for sustainability, but yet lacks a lot of business acumen just purely through experience in the workforce and in that particular industry and or company. And so there's an interesting, I think, as companies are looking at how do they develop their leaders, my question for you is how do you sort of start to look at segments of populations too, where there's maybe a healthier mindset among, let's say, younger generation and then the call it the older generation, my generation. We've been traditionally trained, and we have a certain way of looking at our business, and it's easy to say, well, just here's the strategy. I'm telling you right now how to get from A to B or A to Z, go. And it without that initial mindset, it's going to look like Spanish to them.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I mean, what attracts millennial talent to organizations and to roles is very different than what may have attracted you and I a few years ago. These individuals want to work for mission-driven organizations. They want to make money. Let's be clear. They want to be in a for-profit world, but they want to be also in a role and within an organization that approaches their business and their role in the world from a very sustainable perspective. They want to work for a company that is doing its best to align purpose along with profit. So if you don't have a cultural mindset or an ethos or even an explicitly stated corporate strategy being driven by sustainability, you are not going to be able to attract or recruit or, quite frankly, retain best-in-class next generation millennial leadership talent, because they will go elsewhere where they feel the fruits of their labor will also make the world a better place.
I'm interested. I was reading a report from your firm called The Board's Role in Sustainable Leadership, where it seems to me that the conclusion in one regard was that a sustainability strategy focusing on the near term, like making a lot of investments near term and taking a bold statement in regards to sustainability, have even the best results in yields from that and in the long term as well. So could you talk a bit about like investment strategy and strategizing in time horizons for sustainability?
Are you talking about within a corporate context or an investment management context?
In a corporate context, for how to make a sustainability transition kind of for a company.
Yeah. So I think part of it is the fact that, as we saw from the IPCC report, time is of the essence. We can't sit here and wait for long-term strategic directives to come into play and for a board to gradually over time become sustainably fluent, right? There needs to be action taken in the near term with regard to director education around sustainability, boards partnering with management to help drive sustainability throughout an organization. When we're recruiting leadership roles, in either ESG or sustainability, and we're approaching very senior people around the world, there are two questions that they immediately ask every single time. The first question is, how important is this to the board and to the CEO of the organization? And if it's not a fundamental top pillar of corporate strategy, they're not interested. The mandate has to come from the top. If the board and the CEO are not vocally articulating how important sustainability is to the long-term strategic health of the organization and as a fundamental business strategy, then they're not interested, because they know if they go into a role like this at an organization where it's not that important, they will fail. You cannot succeed unless the board and the CEO are driving the transformation.
Thank you.
It's interesting. So as you're saying that, I was just also looking at a quote that I love from one of your blogs entitled "Boardroom Math Has Changed. E plus S equals G," which I love the title. It says, with climate change risk becoming the number one topic of conversation in boardrooms and C-suites around the world, waiting for boards to somehow become organically credible around the environment and social issues is not an option. Love it. Bold.
Yeah, that raised a few eyebrows, both internally and externally. So I'm glad you picked up on that.
Oh, fantastic. I get so much great content out of your stuff.
Another point that I've been picking up is kind of, as we're talking about this, is sustainability mindset and the long-term orientation, is a quote from a woman called Eva Karlsson, the CEO of Houdini Sportswear. And she was saying in an interview that we don't have sustainability work. We just have a lot of work. And I think that's the mindset I see going forward for success in its widest regard for a company. That's success in the long term entails this sustainability mindset. They're not separate. It's not a separate division. It's the whole division, in my view.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I mean, this is just good business. This is just, if you want your company to succeed in the long run, why wouldn't you employ a more sustainable business strategy? I mean, I hate to say it, it's almost common sense.
I love it. I love it. Well, it's been a real pleasure to have you on here with us today, Kurt. I'm gonna also end with one quote that I also loved. I have so many of them, but this one in particular, and it says, it's out of your article, Assessing and Selecting Sustainable Leaders. And it says, the systemic challenges the world faces today mean that sustainable leadership cannot be confined to a small minority. Companies must instead cultivate sustainable leadership at all levels. This is not something that can wait. It is not a conversation for tomorrow. It is a conversation for today. So thank you for being a part of that conversation today, Kurt. It was a pleasure having you on with us.
Thank you, Brad. Great to be here. And Melker and Brad, thank you for inviting me.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Next time.
Take care.